From the Fantasy Armchair, it is the Fantasy TyRant.
Hey there, fellow fantasy football freaks. It's me, the Ty Guy, the Fantasy TyRant, here to help you crush your competition this week. Remember, if you like what you see, go ahead and hit like for me, and give a subscribe as well. And while you're at it, share it with your friends, your family, your teachers, students, neighbors, co-workers, the barista who makes your coffee every morning but never knows how to spell your fucking name. And make sure that they watch and that they subscribe too, because if we can get 100 subscribers by Monday morning, I'll have something very special for y'all next week. And this isn't some Michael Scott from The Office bullshit. I know exactly what I'll do for you, and you're gonna love it. So if you see that subscriber number and it's not at 100 yet and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that for me and help us out to reach our goal. Not much left to go, so we should be crushing it in the next day or two, right? Let's make it happen. Also, don't forget to donate to men's health charities for the month of November. What am I, growing this scratchy, crusty, itchy beard for nothing? Come on now. If you don't know where to donate, try the Male Cancer Awareness Campaign. I got the link down below in the description. They're actually a pretty cool organization as far as cancer awareness organizations go. I mean, they're raw, they're gritty, they talk about balls. Hey, just like me. Now, speaking of talking about balls, let's talk about some balls right now. I mean footballs. And the players who score fantasy points for us with them. Because it's time for benches and bumps, benches and bumps, benches and bumps. And my QB bump of the week goes to Matt Ryan. This matchup against the Saints could end up being the shootout that we were hoping that the Brady and Breeze matchup was going to be. Except this time, it's Famous Jameis versus Matty Ice. Not quite as marquee, but it could be a show stealer. Hopefully Matty won't shit his drawers against the Saints D like Tom Brady did. I don't see that happening though. The Saints D is middle of the road, and while the Saints score a lot, that means the Falcons are going to need to score a lot too. Win or lose, this could be a banner fantasy day for Matty Ice. Yeah, even if Calvin Ridley sits, I mean, it's not like Julio can't do it all by himself. He's done it before, this year even. Historically speaking, Matt Ryan has done some of his best work against the Saints, and recent memory serves no different. In 3 out of the last 4 games he's played against the Saints, he's completed over 70% of his passes, while throwing for at least 2 touchdowns in each game. Now that's good shit. So give him the bump this week and put your competition on ice. Other QBs I'm bumping up. On the other side of that match is Jameis Winston. We haven't seen this kid play since last season, but he's quite familiar with the Falcons, having spent most of his career with the Bucs. And his history against the Falcons is well documented. In fact, his career best game came against them on Monday Night Football almost 3 years ago. 1 yard shy of 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He completes his best percentage of passes against Atlanta at 66%, and an average of 32 attempts per game. He has scored 25 touchdowns in 9 career games against the Falcons. That's almost 3 touchdowns per game. And he's only been picked 9 times. That's an average of 1 per game, and for heinous Jameis, that's pretty good. So a 300-yard day, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. That's over 20 fantasy points right there before you factor in rushing. Not a bad day. I'd have him higher up on the bump list, but he's got some rust to knock off, and Michael Thomas's play since coming back from injury has been questionable. I still see a 20-plus point game for Jameis, though. I'll take that from a bye-week filler, won't you? Give him the bump up this week. Big Ben has been up and down this season, but his Ben at home versus Ben away garbage seems to be a thing of the past. That's a good thing because they travel to Jacksonville to take on Miles Jack and the Pussycats in what's expected to be his most favorable matchup of the season. If he's going to put up a 30-burger at all this season, this is the game he'll do it. Take advantage and give Big Ben the bump up the starter this week. Want some sleepers? How about Derek Carr? He's already had his best game of the year against KC, and at home this time, he might even do better than that. Kansas City's been lazy on defense as of late, and Carr could take advantage of him at home against a division rival. Give him a go. And Joe Flacco hasn't exactly been a household name in the fantasy community, whether he's considered elite or not. But his play as a backup for the Jets has inspired some hope, especially his connection with Brashard Perriman. Sneaky tournament DFS stack right there. As for my QB bench of the week, I'm going with Tom Brady. Jalen Ramsey's going to make things hard enough for him, but if you paid attention to Tom Brady's career, you know that toward the end of the season, his production starts to drop off a little bit. And the Rams made Russell Wilson look fucking mortal last week, so I don't think Tom's going to be quite so terrific this week. The Rams are the 3rd best defense against opposing quarterbacks, allowing under 19 points per game to signal callers this season. And they've been even better recently, as in the last 3 weeks, they've been the top team defending against quarterbacks. giving up less than 14 points per game over the last few games. Tom Brady's had his ups and downs this season. I see this week as a down, so why don't you go ahead and put him on the bench?
Other QBs I'm benching this week. Ryan Tannehill has been on the decline lately after a hot start to the season. His next 2 games are going to help, and this week he faces a Ravens D who's given up only 15.5 fantasy points to opposing QBs over the past few weeks, with matchups against Cam Newton, Phillip Rivers, and Big Ben, so not exactly a bunch of jamokes. And for the season, the Ravens D has only allowed 3 quarterbacks to pass for multiple touchdowns. That doesn't look good for Tannehill. Plus, you know the Ravens will be looking for blood in a revenge game narrative, as the Titans were the team that knocked the Ravens out of the playoffs last season. Altogether, this equals a bad week to start the Titans QB, so put Tannehill on your bench. Carson Wentz has all his weapons back, so he's ready to roll this week, right? Wrong. You should know by now that if I ask a question that ends in right, the answer is wrong. And you should know by now that Wentz is very hard to predict and trust in fantasy. He puts up ugly but productive weeks, sure, but last week was only ugly, and this week doesn't look any better. No, the Browns D isn't exactly QB kryptonite, but their defensive MVP from last week will be back again this week, and by that, I mean Mother Nature. If the defensive stats of Cleveland's weather would track this year, they'd be off the charts. Wentz's erratic play is enough of a reason to bench him, but there's going to be some wind and a lot of rain, so this should be another defensive slogfest in Cleveland. Leave Wentz on your bench.
Now it's time for the running backs, and my running back bump of the week goes to Mike Davis. Now his play of late hasn't been impressive, but he has faced some pretty stout defenses over the past 5 weeks, like the Bears, the Bucks, and the Saints. The game script has seen the Panthers throwing a lot more. But with Teddy Bridgewater likely out, or at least really banged up, there's not going to be as much throwing, and maybe the offense will lean on Mike Davis a little bit more this week, especially if former XFL star PJ Walker's at the helm for the Panthers this week. Because that means handoffs and checkdowns to Mike Davis, who'll be looking to run it up on a Lions D who's given up over 30 fantasy points per game to running backs. That's dead last in the league. This might be your last week to use Mike Davis, so give him a bump in a plus matchup this week.
Other running backs I'm giving the bump this week? I told you to start watching running backs last week, and hopefully you listened because it paid off. This week, I'm going back to the well, but focusing more on the main man, Antonio Gibson. He scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games, putting up at least 12 fantasy points in 6 of the last 8. The Bengals are in the middle of the pack at stopping the run, but that won't be enough to stop Gibson. Think of this bump as more of an attaboy for a dude I was all over this season. Kalen Ballage has solidified his stranglehold over the Chargers' backfield until Eckler's back. Even if that's just for this week, Ballage is worth a start. The Chargers face the Jets. End of analysis. Moving on. But seriously, the Jets are allowing over 20 fantasy points per game to running backs this season, and Herbert is turning to Ballage for checkdowns and short passes, targeting him 6 times this past game. I had Ballage as a deep dive last week, and that paid off, so I'm giving him a bump up to the main segment this week, and he deserves a bump from you into your starting lineup. Want some sleepers? I got you covered. How about Nyheim Hines? They're going to a hot hand approach in Indy, and Hines is the hot hand right now. Plus, he's the pass-catching back, so especially in PPR and especially in this tasty matchup against the Packers, he's worth a start. And speaking of pass-catching backs, sexy Rexy Burkhead has been turning it up lately, producing on high levels even with Damian Harris getting the bulk of the carries. You may want to snatch him up before anyone notices that he's available for a killer matchup against the second worst team in fantasy against the run in Houston.
As far as the top running back to bench, I'm looking at Aaron Jones this week. I know he's a stud, but his play as of late hasn't been quite so studly. He's still only eclipsed 20 points 1 time this season, back in week 2. I made him my bump of the week last week, and he only scored 12 points, making me look like a fucking tool in the process. Jones can be a stud, but he's just not getting the opportunities this season. Jamal Williams is snatching some of those carries away, eating up his production. And the Colts D might just eat him up entirely. They rank 3rd best against stopping the run this year, and that's not going to help you with your playoff push. So why don't you go ahead and put Aaron Jones on your bench?
Other running backs I'm benching this week? The Pittsburgh D is more than legit. They're fucking scary, especially against the run. I told you to bench a hot Gio Bernard against them last week, and that was a good call. The 2020 edition of the Steel Curtain is cutting legs off of running backs, giving up less than 15 fantasy points to running backs all season. Good enough for second best against the run. This week, they get James Robinson, who's probably the waiver wire pickup of the year this season. He's been great. but in the past 2 weeks, and what should have been plus matchups against two bottom 5 defenses against the run in Green Bay and Houston, he's only put up low-end RB2 numbers. Robinson has had a dream schedule this season, but that dream becomes a nightmare, as 4 of his next 6 games are against top 10 defenses against the run. That nightmare starts this week against the Steelers, so put him on your bench. I know, Todd Gurley is kind of low-hanging fruit right now. His knee arthritis seems to be bothering him, and his explosiveness has subsided for the past few games, but I can't help but picking on him this week. He's had an easy schedule so far this season, but hasn't exactly taken full advantage. He's a solid RB2, sure, but given his talent and schedule, we were hoping for a bit more than that. And to make matters worse, this week he faces the number 1 team at stopping the run, the New Orleans Saints. They're giving up only 13 points per game to running back crews this season. That's brutal. And if you start Gurley, your week will be brutal too. He's had less than 13 fantasy points in good matchups in 3 out of the last 4 weeks. So if you're lucky enough to have snagged some good fill-in running backs with good matchups this week, put Gurley on your bench.
Tossing it over to pass catchers, my wide receiver bump of the week goes to Justin Jefferson. He faced a badass Bears D last week and still put up 8 catches for 135 yards off of 10 targets. And this week, he gets to feast on that fantasy buffet that is the Dallas Cowboys D. Now his good games are harder to predict because he plays across the field from another good wide receiver in Adam Thielen. I just feel like recently, Kirk Cousins hasn't really gelling with Jefferson, and this is the week that Double J struts. Yeah, I got wrestling references too, Adam Rank. What now? He's already on his way to being the top guy for the Vikings, but this might be the game that just catapults him up to the top. Get a piece of that action and give Jefferson the bump this week.
Other wide receivers I'm bumping. Start all your Steelers this week, as the neutered kitties of Jacksonville don't even bother trying to stop QBs and wide receivers from going off. Over the past 3 weeks, they're allowing 33 fantasy points per game to wide receiver cores, and against this tantalizing trio, that number's likely to go up. Take your pick, but my favorite is Deontay Johnson. Everyone has their own take, but I think he's the number 1 guy for Big Ben, and has the best chance to put up a high number each week. He went 6 for 116 in the TD last week, and this week, he could do about the same. Put all your Steelers wide receivers in this week, but if you have more than one, or you're looking for a good DFS play, make sure you give Johnson the bump this week. Brashad Perriman has had 1 good week and 1 okay week. All other weeks, he's done basically nothing. So why am I giving him a bump this week? Am I crazy? Well, yeah, but not for starting Perriman. The 2 games Perriman has had serviceable or better fantasy days are the only 2 in which Flacco has started. Coincidence? Nope. Flacco and Perriman have had a connection going back to their time together in Baltimore, and that's showing up this season. Flacco gets to start again this Sunday, so look for more Flacco to Perriman plays than you can handle. I made the bold prediction to start him on Monday night in Week 9 with the same idea, so join me in starting him this week against the Chargers as they play catch-up, and you'll be looking like a genius come Monday morning. Give Perriman the bump. Sleepers, you say? Sure. How about Michael Pittman? He's quickly becoming the guy in Indy, and the number 1 guy in Rivers' heart. This flare-up from the Rook is no fluke. He had his first 100-yard outing last week, and he's poised to do it again this week against Green Bay. Indy will need to score a lot to keep up, and Pittman could have a good week as a result. Fire him up. And Emmanuel Sanders has been hit and miss, but he has such a juicy matchup this week against the Falcons. It's hard to imagine him having anything but a great day. The Falcons are the 2nd worst defense in fantasy against opposing wide receivers, giving up over 30 points per game to the position. And Michael Thomas is back, but it seems to be a stand-in as the real MT is still MIA. So I think there's a lot of targets that'll go to Sanders. Take advantage and start him up.
As for wide receivers I'm putting on the pine, Tom Brady's got a bad matchup this week, so is this the week that I'm gonna put Evans on the pine like everyone thinks I should? Hell no. Like I said earlier in the week, I don't get the hate for Evans, who's been a top 10 wide receiver this year so far. He's the only guy TB12's been throwing to with any consistency. No, I'm not down on Evans this week. I'm actually down on Chris Godwin. He's been dealing with nagging hamstring and finger injuries, and it shows. He is yet to eclipse 20 fantasy points this season, and splitting time with Evans and Antonio Brown, it ain't helping matters. I'd say Godwin's the bust this year, not Evans. So if I were you, I'd leave Godwin on your bench.
Other wide receivers I'm putting on the pine. Marvin Jones has only been okay since Kenny Galladay went down with injury. Even in good matchups where he's the top wide receiver, he's been serviceable at best. Once Kenny comes back, Marvin will go back to waiver wire fodder. Last week, he was finally productive, but this week, against the harsh Panthers pass D, I don't see that happening. Expect Galladay to be back this week, and even if he's not, Jones ain't doing a goddamn motherfucking thing this season, so put him on your bench. Crowder's been forgotten since Flacco took over the offense because Flacco only passes to Perriman, and this week, he's going to be shut out by surprisingly stingy Chargers D. Bad matchup, QB's ignoring him, not a major talent anyway, until Darnold comes back. Leave Jamison Crowder on your bench.
Finally, we come to tight ends, and my bump of the week goes to Jared Cook. The Falcons D will be all over the Saints wide receivers, so Jameis has to throw somewhere, right? I'm sure they'll include some sort of gadgetry with Taysom Hill, but I think that Winston is going to be relying on Jared Cook this week. I think as he becomes acclimated to his new offense, he's going to be looking for that security blanket, which is usually the tight end. And Jared Cook is a pretty good tight end as far as security blankets go. Falcons are the worst team against tight ends, giving up over 12 fantasy points a game to them. So this looks like a good game for Jared, so you may as well give him the bump and let him cook this week.
Other tight ends I'm giving the bump. Justin Herbert's finally connecting with Hunter Henry, and if that becomes a thing, Henry's value is going to go through the roof. And this week, Double H has a matchup against the Jets, who are bottom 10 against opposing tight ends this season. I can see him getting about 5 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown this week. Someone write that down. And while you're at it, give Double H a bump up to your starting spot this week. Logan Thomas hit double-digit fantasy points 2 out of his last 4 games, and this week, he gets a plus matchup against the Bengals. Since he's been giving up the second most points to tight ends this year, over 11 points per game. Check please. Keep Thomas hot and give him the bump this week.
And the tight end most worthy of a benching this week is Noah Fant. It's not really his fault though. The Broncos will likely be without Drew Lock, so it'll be Brett Rippon at the helm. I don't trust anyone in the passing game for Denver this week. Plus, the Dolphins' D has been pretty stout against tight ends this season, giving up only 6.5 fantasy points to them. You likely have better options this week at tight end, so put Noah Fant on your bench!
Other tight ends I'm putting on the pine? How about all Colts tight ends? The Packers D are the kings of stopping tight ends this season, especially lately, giving up just over 3 fantasy points per game to the tight ends the last 3 games. Fuck that! Burton, Doyle, Allie Cox, leave all the Colts tight ends on your bench. Jonnu Smith has been nothing more than a glorified matchup-based tight end this season, and this isn't a plus matchup for him. Simple as that. He has great potential, but Tannehill just isn't throwing to him. Plus, the Ravens are hard to score touchdowns against. He's got some good weeks coming up, but if you can afford it this week, put Jonnu on your bench.
So that's it for benches and bumps, but before I get to the deep dives, here's some defenses that you can stream this week.
Both sides of the Eagles-Browns game should offer great defensive value. I don't see a lot of scoring in this one and another bad weather game, so that bodes well for both the Browns and the Eagles defenses this week. Both are owned in only about 50% of fantasy leagues, so maybe you'll be able to pick them up. But if they're not available, I got one more for you. The Washington football team, man, I hope they get a real name soon. Anyway, they've been shockingly good on defense, overachieving this season, and this week they have a matchup against the Bengals. Burrow's been alright, but his O-line's been letting him get murdered, giving up 32 sacks already this season. I can hear Chase Young salivating from here. He wants to show Burrow why he should have been the number 1 overall pick. And Sweat and Kerrigan will be looking to feast as well. I have a good feeling about the Washington squad this week.
So there's some Ds you can pick up. Now let's talk about some double Ds. Now I'm talking about deep dives, you pervert. And I've got 5 of them right here for you.
Taysom Hill has become usable as a tight end in a lot of leagues. Not Yahoo leagues, though. Then again, they're behind in a lot of things, am I right? Anyway, if you're in a deep league where you could put him in as a tight end, snatch him up. He's at least good bye-week filler. LaMichael Pirine is set to become the lead back for the Jets, and while that's like being the CEO of some random porta potty, in this injury-riddled season, any starting running back can be useful. Kick the tires on him and see what he can do. Maybe he'll be good with Flacco QB and give him a look. I had to look up how to pronounce Savon Ahmed's name, but this dude came out of nowhere like an RKO from Randy Orton. Told you, I got wrestling references too. But this guy carried the ball 21 times, from a bunch of zeros to 7 to 21 over the past few weeks. Damn. The Chargers can be had against the run, so start Ahmed up. CeeDee Lamb may have been forgotten on the waiver wire, but not in Andy Dalton's heart. He had a thing going with Lamb before everything fell apart, but now that the pieces are coming back together, it's time for these two to hook up again. What am I, writing a romance novel? No, but I do love me some CeeDee Lamb as a sleeper this week against a weak Viking secondary. And my super deep danger dive of the week? Cam Sims. The Bengals are easily beat downfield. Just look at how they bent over, lubed up, and took it straight up the chute from the Steelers last week. Sims is the deep threat here, and while Alex Smith isn't exactly a gunslinger, he could get a sneaky opportunity here and connect with Sims on a long bomb. Smith has been targeting Sims since he took over at the helm, so this could be the week where Sims shines. Try him as a DFS tourney play, or if you play in a super deep league, start him up.
Another show in the books, folks. Come back next week for some more. Now remember, next week I'm only doing 2 shows. One on Monday, that'll be the waiver wires, and then on Wednesday I'm gonna do your benches, bumps, and deep dives a day early. Hey, it's like a little treat for Thanksgiving, right? And don't worry, because I will cover all the juicy matchups for Thanksgiving Day. But hey, if you just hit subscribe and hit the bell, you won't have to remember shit. My videos will just pop up in your feed. Plus, we're so close to that 100 subscriber goal, I can taste it. Remember, get it done before Monday, and I'll have a special treat for you all next week. So hit subscribe and reap the rewards. Thank you so much for all your support and your feedback. Even the assholes talking shit, I'm okay with that. Anyway, good luck this week, everyone. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @fantasy_tyrant. That way you'll get all my extra picks and like bonus predictions, all that kind of shit. So that's it. Till next week, I'm out. Peace.